Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It is Sunday. Let's go ahead and get caught up on the headlines and then the latest Alien Earth episode, all about Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. That will be at the end of the show today. But let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back. So, you've probably heard by now, Ghislaine Maxwell has successfully exonerated Trump in the eyes of the right. And she's essentially placed Epstein and the Epstein associations squarely on the Democrats in this latest clown show act under what appears to be the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey circus. But the people on the right think this is legitimate and they're going to go with this because it's all they have, because it's now been politicized. Look, I understand when someone is stuck in the right left divide, they're always going to default to believing what their side tells them, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. And this is absolutely the case in this situation. And I'm already hearing people telling us to move on from this and that Trump is protecting the integrity of our political system by withholding the files. And, at this point, I believe a lot of people think he's innocent. And they believe this coerced testimony of a woman who had no other choice than to lie through her teeth for the jailer who's holding the keys to her future and possibly her life. Again, I truly believe Trump had something to do with Epstein's disappearance or death. We don't know at this point. But what did we think she was going to say? Now, they haven't let her out yet, but this whole thing is set up for some kind of a long con. And in the end, I believe that she will be pardoned on some level. But the cat's already out of the bag because she's getting this special treatment already. And that says it all. Heck, I'm even hearing people say that they don't care what Trump may have done in the past, that we have much bigger problems now. And it's truly baffling. And of course, Trump is doing some good things. And that's, I believe, just a smokescreen. He's putting pressure on hospitals to get rid of gender affirming care for minors. Now, that's low hanging fruit because, believe it or not, this doesn't even happen that often. We're talking a few thousand cases, and even a few thousand is too much, but it's much easier to go after something like this to get everyone distracted and to get people focused on this and some of the good that Trump's doing than to reveal the past and what actually happened. Let's read about this, you guys. Now, there's all kinds of funny business going on here. We're going to get into some of these stories and get caught up on what's going on. Ghislaine Maxwell interview on Epstein case released. So we do now have the interview. And it says here, 2-day interview with the sex trafficker and Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. The transcripts, which run for over 300 pages, came after Blanche traveled to Florida last month to meet with her, following pushback over the Trump administration handling of the Epstein case's fallout. The release of the transcripts came as the Justice Department also turned over thousands of pages of files to the House Oversight Committee, which said it would publish after the children part of it, and any other information about the victims is redacted. Now, we expect that they redact the victims' names and things, but we need to hear the stories. We need to know exactly what happened, don't we? Now, what else is going on? Well, they're now saying, here is the part about Bill Clinton. She said basically they've politicized this and they're trying to make it look like only the Democrats did something wrong. But in actuality, there's much more to this. Ghislaine Maxwell told top officials that former President Bill Clinton never visited Epstein's private island and had no independent relationship with him outside of the trips the ex-president took on Epstein's plane in the early 2000s. So she seems to be kind of exonerating him. President Clinton was my friend, not Epstein's friend, Maxwell told the deputy attorney general. President Clinton liked me, and we got along terribly well, but I never saw that warmth with Mr. Epstein. Gosh, she's just rewriting history. So now, of course, Bill Clinton is off the hook. And people are taking notice of this testimony. They're like, something's wrong here. CNN analyst pinpoints the weirdest part of Maxwell's bizarre interview. Wish they would just get to the point in these articles, right? Whether they were asked straight up whether he found Maxwell's account credible. Oh my gosh, no. Before explaining what he found odd about her take in this transcript, Ghislaine Maxwell provides a simply bizarre worldview wherein almost nobody did anything wrong. She doesn't even implicate Epstein. Maxwell, he went on, basically says in a transcript that she doesn't have any knowledge of Epstein's alleged crimes, and also maintains that she herself is absolutely 100% innocent. Well, of course, she's going to say that. So this is a big nothing sandwich. But look at this. Even though she exonerated the Clintons, she also talks about the Clinton Global Initiative. Now, we had uncovered this years ago when all this was going down, and I just re-uploaded this a couple of months ago about this connection to the Clinton Global Initiative. Many people remember that video. Again, we broke that years ago, but then I re-uploaded it maybe about a month ago. It was when we recovered this. Let's read about this, you guys. She says she was very central to the startup of the Clinton Global Initiative. Remember, this is where they were selling the oceans. That was the Terramar project, and then that was linked into this global initiative. The Department of Justice on Friday released a transcript of its interview with Maxwell, and took place on July 24th to 25th. And the United States Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche interviewed Maxwell, blah, blah, blah. She described her involvement with the Clinton Global Initiative, which hosts an annual meeting with leaders of nonprofit and philanthropic organizations, prominent voices in business, labor, and finance, youth leaders, and grassroots activists, heads of state, and prominent government officials. You were part of the ramp-up or the startup of the Clinton Global Initiative, Blanche asked. I was, Maxwell responded. I would say very central to that, yes. She added that Epstein was very enthusiastic about her involvement in the initiative. Now, I believe this was a cover for trafficking. They're not admitting that here, but this is the dead giveaway. Wow. And now, all of a sudden, Trump said he could care less if the Epstein files were released to Congress. And of course, that's the dead giveaway because it likely means that his name and any implications in the files have likely already been purged. He said he wouldn't object to the release of all the files tied to Epstein. I'm in support of them keeping it open. Innocent people shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. Well, check this out. They're now saying, the House committee is now saying that the files that they've received are the files that were already public. So it appears as though Trump is gaslighting them. Oh, you want the files? Here you go. Well, it was the files that were already public. Unbelievable. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are decrying that they say is a lack of new records. Only 3% of the documents that they've received are new. The rest are already in the public domain. Less than 1% of the files have been released. Department of Justice is stonewalling. Wow. So this is what we get. Smoke and mirrors, games. Now, Trump is coming for Chicago next. It appears as though the Pentagon is making plans to now invade Chicago. Pentagon working on plans for military deployment in Chicago, Washington Post reports. They are now going to deploy troops, as Donald Trump says he is cracking down on crime, homelessness, and undocumented immigration. So he's going one by one to all of the major Democrat cities to invade them, essentially. Let's keep reading. The Defense Department planning in the works for weeks involves several options, including mobilizing at least a few thousand members of the National Guard as soon as September. Chicago is a mess, he told the reporters on Friday, deriding its mayor as he continued his attack on cities run by Democrat politicians, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. Wow. So here we go. Now, it was just Friday. We were talking about how Trump will racialize, and I know that's not a word, but we're going to make it a word. He's racializing this whole thing with these cities. And I told you that he was going to bring up the black aspect of this just to stir the pot. And literally within hours of our show on Friday, no sooner had I spoken the words, the very next day, Trump does exactly that. He literally said African American ladies are begging him, please, President Trump, come to Chicago after DC crime crackdown. This is unbelievable. Let's read this. Trump is making plans to expand his federalized crackdown on crime beyond Washington, D.C. On Friday, he spoke with reporters outside the Oval Office, where he praised the National Guard and D.C. police for doing an incredible job. After we do this, we will go to another location and make it safe also. Chicago is a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. We'll straighten that one out. That will probably be our next one after this. It won't even be tough. The people of Chicago are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. Trump continues the latest personalized merchandise. Wow. Trump was right about everything. Unbelievable. African American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago, please, he said. I did great with the black vote, as you know. They want something to happen. Unreal. So let's take Trump at his word and assume that his true purpose of these city invasions is to get rid of crime. Well, if he's going to do that, wouldn't that also include the arrest of corrupt politicians? Wouldn't that include all of the organized crime going on in Chicago, the money laundering, and all of that? Are we going to see the true financial crime crackdown? I doubt it. I doubt it. They're doing something when they go into these cities. They're setting something up, and I can't quite put my finger on it. They're setting up an infrastructure inside of these cities, is my opinion. It could be cameras. It could be drone, headquarters or something, command stations. Something is changing in these cities. And here's another question. Where are all these homeless people being taken to? Did you notice the trend here? They're saying that they're going after illegals and the homeless. They're lumping the two in together. Well, we know where the illegals are going, or so they tell us. They're going to these detention facilities and then they're being deported. What if Trump is deporting the homeless? Now, they never admit to that. But where else are they putting them? Does anybody know? Is there some kind of documentation about what's happening with this? Are we seeing stories being run on the plight of the homeless and where they're ending up in these situations? I haven't seen anything yet. It's almost like they're just disappearing. Now, let's keep going with this, and then we'll get into Alien Earth and this whole Peter Pan meme, which is just weird. So, military is going to Chicago. Now, this next story, remember this guy, the first Neuralink patient? Well, he just took the stage, came out, and was talking to everybody, and he says he's happy and everything's working, and this is the best thing that's ever happened in his life. They call him Participant 1, the first human implanted with Elon Musk's Neuralink brain chip. Can't speak this morning. February 2024, Nolan Arbaugh, the first person to get Elon Musk's experimental brain chip, rolled across the stage in a wheelchair during a Neuralink all-hands meeting, revealing his identity for the first time. The room filled with Neuralink employees erupted in applause as Arbaugh who dislocated two of his vertebrae in a swimming accident in 2016, has since lost sensation and movement below his shoulders. He smiled ear to ear in this chair, a red Texas A&M hat planted on his head. He grinned as he began to speak. Hello, humans. Wow. That's loaded, right? Is this because he's no longer human? About a month before that town hall, Arbaugh had undergone surgery at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix to get an experimental chip embedded into his brain, which Neuralink had been working on and testing on humans for the past 9 years. Arbaugh was anesthetized, and in surgery that lasted just under 2 hours, a Neuralink-made robotic surgery device implanted the chip and connected tiny threads with more than 1,000 electrodes to the neurons in his brain. Now the device can measure electrical activity, process signals, then translate those signals into commands to a digital device. This allows him to control a computer with his mind. He can do things like play Mario Kart, control his television, and turn his Dyson air purifier on and off without physically moving his fingers or any other part of his body. The first day that Arbaugh used his device, he beat the 2017 world record for speed and precision in BCI cursor control. Wow. It was very, very easy to learn how to use, he tells me in an interview. When Arbaugh became participant 1, or P1, as he is often referred to by Neuralink employees and subsequent studies participants, he joined a list of about 80 people to ever receive such a device. P1, that's like player 1, right? So it's like a video game and the whole Mario Kart connection. Wow. Becoming the first patient to get a Neuralink implant, in particular, is its own rite of passage. For one, Neuralink's device has threads with more than 1,000 electrodes, giving the device a much higher connectivity rate than most of the BCIs currently being studied in humans in the market. But Neuralink also places its electrodes in the motor cortex, the part of the brain that controls movement. A more invasive approach than competitors like Synchron or Precision Neuroscience. Wow. Now, think about this. If the device is put in the part of the brain that controls movement, obviously there's a signal, right? A signal that is sent out by our nervous system, the same signal that would move your hand. So essentially, this is just a parlor trick. If there's already an electric signal being sent, then that signal is just intercepted and it moves something, right? That's the way I look at it. It's not like this thing is reading his mind and his mind is telling him to move the cursor. It's responding to the electrical signal that's sent to move the hand or something. That's the way I look at it. Wow. Now, what else is going on? Well, if you haven't heard by now, there's this military buildup in the United States and it against Venezuela. We've got ships being deployed. China is now warning the U.S. that if we step over the line here and we start stacking up warships outside of Venezuela, that's going to mean trouble for the U.S. China warns U.S. over military buildup as warships head toward Venezuela. U.S. destroyers closed in on Venezuela's coast on Thursday. China condemned Washington's military buildup and warned against foreign interference, backing Maduro in a showdown that is drawing in powers far beyond the Caribbean. So this is definitely one to watch, you guys. This could be our next war. Us against China in the Caribbean on behalf of Venezuela. Unbelievable. Now, we're going to go back to a story from years and years ago. Remember the Malheur bird sanctuary standoff? We covered it live years and years ago. Remember, I fell asleep during the live stream. And then shortly after that, after I think it was weeks standoff, Lavoy Finicum was killed on the highway, and it was all caught on videotape. Well, guess what? FBI honors agents involved in Lavoy Finicum standoff with a bravery medal for killing an old man being chased down the highway who wanted to stand up to tyranny peacefully. And they get the Medal of Bravery. Unbelievable, you guys. Unbelievable. I'll put a link to this story as well. This is our future. As I told you, first it was the illegals. Then it's the homeless. Then it's the criminals. And that's just a cover story. And pretty soon they're coming after the white right. They're going to come after what they will call domestic terrorists, anybody who disagrees with what they're doing, preppers and everybody else. And since we didn't stand up for the other people, they're coming for people like us next. Wow. Let me check in with you guys and then we'll get into Alien Earth. Good morning. Yep. Lavoy Finicum was the Ruby Ridge Waco. We watched him gunned down in broad daylight, and they get a Medal of Honor. Bravery. Unbelievable. I did not cover the Cracker Barrel story. Almost ending up in McDonald's burgers. Who knows? Now, let's get into this Alien Earth. And let me get you guys caught up on the plot of this. So, the children whose consciousness was transferred into super robots, they begin to question their reality as they face off against the alien. And they explain in this latest episode that their creator made them transsexual and renamed them with names from Peter Pan. Now we know that the word pansexual comes from Pan, the Peter Pan, and Pan, the god of the forest. Pan means everything or all or one. But in this latest episode, Wendy, she was the first of the children to be transferred into the robotic body. And she's the only one that gets to keep her name because she was the first to transfer. So I looked up the name Wendy, and it means white or pure. Sounds like the word Bella we just looked up. White or white ring. This is from the Gaelic or Welsh roots. White ring. Now this has to be connected in some way to all this. White circle, white ring. It also means friend. But let's dig into this. Let's watch this next clip here, and then we'll begin to break some of this down and what this whole Peter Pan connection means.
Why couldn't we keep our names when they made us? How come Peter Pan? Why didn't we get to choose?
I don't know, I think it's because we're a secret. You know, like they're all code names.
We're not even all boys, we're half girls. How come Wendy gets to be Wendy?
Just because lost boys, you know, they don't grow up.
But they put us in grown-up bodies.
Wow. So there they spilled the beans. Now, what is all this about? Let's break this down a little bit further. Now, we all know the story of Peter Pan, the boy who refused to grow up. This is self-described in the Peter Pan lore. And this is exactly what we have in Alien Earth. The reason why they have to use children for these first consciousness transfer experiments is because they say that adults wouldn't take. They couldn't do the transfer because their minds were already too well formed. So they used children in the first experiments. Now, this was the oldest reference that I could find to Peter Pan, was in the play from 1904. It became a novel in 1911, but we know the story of Pan is much, much older. And they admit that in this article here. They say that the Peter Pan character was based off of the god Pan, who's in the forest, the god of pipes, with the hooves of a goat that would lure children in the forest with his pipes. Now, this is something we've covered in the past. This whole lore behind Pan and its connection to a particular nymph named Syrinx. Syrinx was the nymph of Artemis, as you can see here, and she was turned into a sea of reeds by Pan himself, who then cut the reeds to form his pipe, which essentially is his mind control frequency, the sound of control. Now, the word Syrinx, the name of this woman, this nymph, obviously became the root of the word syringe, another hollow reed. Wow. And we had talked about this before, but it's more important than ever that you understand what all this means. Syringes and flutes are both pipes and hollow reeds. It's essentially a hollow needle with a hole in it. You blow through the hole and it makes the sound. Imagine breaking the tip off of a syringe. You could literally, if you were small enough, blow into it and make sound come out of it. Now, the reason why all this is so important in this mythology with Syrinx and Pan and Artemis is because Artemis is the twin of Apollo, the twin sister. And there's a little bit more to this because there was a brother named Alopeicus. Here it is here, Astrobacchus and Alopeicus. They were two brothers, and they literally found Artemis under a willow tree. And this word probably sounds familiar too, this name, one of these brothers, because alopecia, of course, is the word for baldness. Alopecia, from which that was derived. Now, why would they be renaming these ancient Greek characters into modern words if they didn't have any meaning? Even the fact that Alopeicus found Artemis under a willow tree is important. Willow trees look like a full head of hair. That's what they're known for. So at this point, it's obvious to me that Artemis and Apollo, the twins who make disease with their poison arrows, and then they trade the cure for a sacrifice, that this whole thing has something to do with pandemics. Needles, arrows, sound frequencies, baldness, disease, and cures. We are literally recreating ancient Greek mythology in our modern times. Wow. Now, I used to be able to find this stuff pretty easily, like this Alopeicus character. But when I went to Google search this for this show, I could not find it. It's as if the AI had scrubbed all of these references to alopecia, the willow tree, Artemis, and her nymph Syrinx, who was turned into a sea of reeds by Pan, and then was used to make his pan pipe. I think we're getting too close to home for these people, and they're starting to erase the information so that we cannot make the connections anymore. So here we are, you guys. That's the update. And this is how it connects to alien Earth. Now, you heard her also mention the Lost Boys And when I look back in the lore of Peter Pan, the original lore, the Lost Boys were said to have been babies that fell out of their carriage. And I believe that is a direct reference to disembodied spirits. These androids are the babies that fell out of the carriage. Their consciousness fell out of its body. Let's watch this back one more time.
Why couldn't we keep our names when they made us? How come Peter Pan? Why didn't we get to choose?
I don't know, I think it's because we're a secret. You know, like they're all code names.
We're not even all boys, we're half girls. How come Wendy gets to be Wendy?
Just because Lost Boys, you know, they don't grow up.
But they put us in grown-up bodies.
Wow. Disembodied spirits. That's where all of this is headed. See how all this fits into the Neuralink and everything that's happening right now, and this whole push to identify the DNA, the mRNA, diseases, cures, the rise of artificial intelligence that they say will solve cancer. All of it's connected. I wonder if some of these homeless people are being experimented on some level, and they needed, new people to experiment on. Who knows? All right, I'm back in the chat, you guys. Thanks for showing up on Sunday. All right. Soul harvesting. Yeah, I think on some level that's what they're up to. Yeah, I'm pretty upset about the homeless situation as well. I think the homeless and the vets and the van lifers should have areas of the nature opened up for them to live. That's the solution. And I'm not talking about some kind of FEMA camp. I'm talking about the earth, a free area where you can freely camp and live. There shouldn't be any restrictions other than normal laws that you and I have, right? So littering, drug use, not allowed. What's so wrong with that? What is so wrong with that? But instead, they just disappear into oblivion. No one knows what's happening to these homeless people and these vets and the van lifers. Wendy flies with Peter as Lois flies with Superman. Oh, there's a neat connection. Joy. Wow. And remember, the fairy, they could fly with fairy dust. I think Peter Pan was the only one who could fly without the fairy dust, if I'm remembering this correctly. I camped in the 80s up and down the coast because I could, says Lorraine Ray. There would be no tax collection in a living situation like that. Exactly, Madeline. And that's why they won't let people do it. They want everybody locked in the system so they can tax you, so they can send you bills for things. This is what they're really against. Anyone that lives outside of the system. Back in Yahtzee, Germany, they call them asocials, and they were punished for living outside of the system. They want us all in Egypt, in the system. It's not really free land, Brian. It's the ability to live in the land and use it. It won't belong to anybody. So they set up their tent. That's your space. Now, no one can take your space from you once your space is set up, but it's not your space under the definition of how we have land ownership. It's a free space for all to hang out in and not be bothered. I think that's a biblical concept. It's not a homeless encampment by your home. It's somewhere way out away from the cities to where people can live. Why are we so opposed to that? Oh, because someone's getting something for free? That's the problem. We're not supposed to be concerned about that. God gave Adam the earth. We shouldn't even have to pay for land. Land should be something that if you can take care of a part of the land that you're living in, then that's your land. You shouldn't have to pay anybody for that land. That's like, would God make us pay for land? No, God created this earth. It's man's system that has created a situation where you have to pay for things. And I understand if you don't want a homeless encampment near where you live, well, that's why you put it in these areas where there's nobody at. You make an access road in and out for, law enforcement to go in if they need to handle situations. And it's way out in the forest where you're not going to have any problems and people can live there. But instead, that's illegal. And it wasn't until recent history that people didn't already do this. You guys, we're forgetting. Remember how the West was won? The pioneers, that's essentially what they did. They were homesteaders. They went into new areas and they set up camp. Yes, eventually they built houses, but a lot didn't. What about the Native Americans? That's exactly what they did. They lived in places, they set up their teepees, and they lived. It was a homeless encampment. We just have different labels now. And of course, it's all throughout the Bible. Heck, the 12 tribes of Israel was a giant homeless encampment that moved around. But would we have rejected them and said, "Oh, we don't want the 12 tribes of Israel living outside of near my place"? Think about it. It's all semantics. The homeless have been labeled a certain way, modern homelessness, to make you have negative feelings and thoughts. And as I just said, the homeless encampment should also have the same rules that we do. No drugs, no littering, right? You guys, it's no different than a giant concert where people just never go home because that is their home. We see it all the time. Why do people pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a ticket to go to one of these outdoor concerts where everyone's quote unquote camping for weeks and weeks? But all of a sudden it's wrong for people who don't want entertainment to go and camp somewhere. I don't get it. I don't understand how people think sometimes. Sewage issues and garbage disposal. Well, how did they handle it back in the day? How did they handle it back in the day? How did the pioneers handle it? How did the Native Americans handle it? Again, there is a solution, but a lot of people don't want to think about that. They only think of things in terms of modern limitations and mental limitations. Give someone a shovel and they bury it. Or there's a place, a latrine, where they all dump it and it's covered. I'm sure if you talk to Native American tribes, they had a system for this. Heck, wouldn't it be cheaper to have the access road have porta potties? Look, if we can't spare a little bit of money to fund porta potties for some of these camps, then I don't know what we are as humans. Like, it's much easier to do that than the problem that we have now. So, anyway, we got to rethink how we think about these things. I mean, think about it. We have 10,000 squirrels. I have 10,000 squirrels. Where do they go to the bathroom? Right? There's deer and wildlife. Why does all of nature get to go to the bathroom in the forest? But for some reason, we as humans are forbidden from doing that. bears pee and poop and all that all throughout the forest. But if you're a human, that's forbidden. And last I checked, there's a lot less humans than there is wildlife out there, right? Herds and herds of deer and bear and elk and all the other wild animals that run around at night. Possums, raccoons, they all go to the bathroom in the forest. This whole thing of sanitation, that was like a modern thing where they basically, it was one more reason why they made it forbidden for you to be out and be homeless. It's just one more thing, in my opinion. If anybody should have the right to go to the bathroom in the forest, it should be a human being, right? Because this is our domain. We've been given all this by the Lord. He gave us all this. So no one should be able to stop you from taking a leak somewhere, right? I mean, unless you're like in a city and then you're sharing the space with a bunch of other people. But if you're out by yourself, there should be no problem with that. We've just forgotten that we're human beings and that this is our inherited earth. And so we start thinking through the minds of our controllers who have made up all these false paradigms to make us think that it's not okay, but it actually is. All right, you guys. Well, I guess I'm going to pop off here. Thanks for showing up. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Much love.